Today I'd like to do two things. One, I wanted to report back to you about what I found doing the last part of the activity that I invented with the pine cones and looking at deduction with the kids. And um, then I thought it would be useful for us as a group to brainstorm some topics and ideas that would be useful for us to explore as a group, and uh, and so we can get those on the calendar. So we'd like to find out what subjects you would like to visit or to revisit. Sometimes there are kind of high percentage things that we would want to kind of revisit. I would also in this discussion like to open ourselves up to a general discussion about the way that we are going about doing things on this educators forum. Is the format useful? Are these kinds of conversations the sorts of things that you want to be having? How can, and we're not fishing for compliments here, we're looking for suggestions to improve. So I'm guessing that all of you kind of think this is fun because you're here. But what can we do to make this better? What can we do to make this better? So that's our plan for today. So let me first fill you folks in on this deduction activity that, hold on, I'm getting some pine cones. So what I did with the kids was we started off on day one just we played with what are these crazy objects. We had a whole bunch of cones and all this stuff was found underneath a pine tree, and there were cones in a lot of different states, and let me show you what those were. Let's go to this cam. Oh dear. Let's not go to that cam. Let's plug the cam and plug it back in again, and then try to go to that cam. For some reason, this has been happening with my cam. I have to figure out how to get it to switch without doing something weird.
I think that you need to make an offering to Cthulhu.
Yes, that often helps. So I put here, this is the puzzle I put out in front of the kids. So what's going on with this? These are all found underneath the tree. What's happening? How are they related? What is there a sequence to how these things kind of fit together? Let's think about these in time. And we started just by, they picked a few that were interesting, and on their journal pages, they diagrammed those, and they you know, what are you seeing here, and what and I gave them some tricks. Like for instance, I showed them, you know, you can put this down, you can kind of trace around it, and then you get something that is roughly the right size. And you know, showed them the pine cone trick where you draw these sets of diagonal lines, and then they were really pleased with the sketches that they were making then of these little structures. But then what I asked them to do is to sort them, and they came up into sort of what you think the story is here. How are these related to each other? And what was interesting about this is that there are two totally different stories. One story was that these things grow on the tree, right? These things grow and then they get bigger and bigger and bigger. And as they're doing that, then from the bottom end here, these things start forming on them. These little scales start forming on them, and those work their way more towards the top and eventually wrap around the top. And then they start to open up. So once they go to this, they open up. And then sometimes when they're open, pieces of that fall off. And that's what this is, right? It's a piece of one of these opened ones that fell off. So we divided into several groups. One group came up with that little explanation, and we diagrammed that on the board, where we started with this, and then it turned into that, and then it turned into this, and then it's turned into that, right? So doot. However, there was another group. There was another group. And what they said is that we think it starts with these things kind of on the smaller side, and that these things get bigger over time. And then they sometimes turn brown. So starting more greenish and smaller, and then they turn brown and bigger. And then sometimes then two things can happen to it. One is that they thought that some critter might be tearing at these and ripping them apart. And they rip them apart from the top. So it'd be starting like this, ripping it apart from the top, and then they rip off more of it. And then they rip off even more of it. And eventually you get down to one of these things. And these little pieces are the parts that have been ripped off. However, others that don't get torn apart by somebody, those ones can start to open up. And that's what these are. So from here, it can take two different directions, from here down here, or from here up here. And that is what we diagrammed here. So they're starting smaller, getting bigger, and then growing even bigger. And then the others opening up, and then others getting nibbled from the top down. And that is what these two, the two ideas were. Right, so that happened over two different class periods. In the first class period, we just sort of observed these and diagrammed them. On the second one, they sorted them and they came up with these two investigations, or these two explanations of how these things might be related. And then we did kind of a fun thing. We said, if this first one, this top one, is true, what would we expect to see if we go out there and we look on the tree? What do we expect to see if we look on the tree? And then, and they said, if this one is true, kind of on the tree, there would be a lot of these things, right? And you could have some of these other stages still on the tree, but they expected there to be a lot of these little buds of this thing growing. All right, so that was a prediction that they would make if it starts with this. And then we asked, if this one down here is true, what would you expect to see on the tree? And they said you'd expect to see lots of these cones like this. And you might be able to see some of these in the tree. And these ones, if it's being ripped apart by a critter, as they thought that those would be on the ground. But these wouldn't be attached up in the tree. So what's neat about that is that these, there's a different predictions depending on which one if one of them is, they can't both be what's going on. And one predicted that these ones, which they referred to as the armadillos, there'd be a lot of armadillos on the tree. And the other, they predicted that there'd be a lot of these ones that they called chainsaws. There'd be a lot of chainsaws on the tree. So are we going to go see armadillos or chainsaws on the tree? And then I explained that what would be the next step. They said, let's go look at the tree. Unfortunately, this tree was not near the school site, but I took my daughter to the tree. She climbed up, and indeed, what she found is a whole bunch of these. And these were on the ground, but there were none of them attached on the tree. She could not find one of these on the tree. We found a bunch of this stage still on the tree and this stage still on the tree. These ones were out towards the tips of the branches. These ones were closer in. So we came back and we reported on that. And we first reviewed what are the predictions with this one and what are the predictions with this one. And they put those out. We then showed them the results. I had video footage by Carolyn who climbed up the tree. And then we said, which one do you think is, if our assumptions about what is going on in these are accurate, which one do you think is more likely and which one do you think is less likely? And the class decided that these ones here, this explanation was much less likely because we didn't find these. And this one was more likely because we did find these up in the branches of the tree. In addition to that, there's one girl who, what was kind of fun is that she has, I've watched her in her interactions with other kids. She had been kind of sidelined in some social things. But her hand was up, 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 up. And she says, but is it possible that this one up here is what was going on? However, at this season, we don't find these in the tree anymore. Because she said that sometimes you find flowers on trees and sometimes you don't. What if it's something like that? And she said, I'm thinking it's more likely this one, but I'm not giving up on this one 100% because what if this is also, what if there's a seasonal thing going on here? Then I asked her, what would you want to do to kind of find that out? And she said, I'd want to come back and I'd want to look at this tree at different times of the year. Now, hold on, I'm going to change cams here. See if we can do this smoothly. That blew me away. So what this, yeah, Avea said, I like her thinking. So this kid got mad props for kind of coming up with this. And the class agreed that it's more likely the second one, based on the evidence that we saw. But there's a possibility that the other one, although they don't think they think it's less likely. And so what's neat is that this is a class of fourth graders, and they weren't talking in absolute terms. They're saying more likely, less likely, and also kind of having reasons to, a plausible reason why we can't completely roll out this other hypothesis. I thought that was really, really neat. So we could also have a conversation about what is the strength of the evidence for that. And so this activity, I had a lot of fun in it. I thought by the end that the fourth graders would be able to explain to me the difference between induction and deduction. And I made several stabs at that, and that did not go over well. Right? But this idea that you can have an idea about something that is not 100%, even if you haven't been there, and watch these things fall off the tree, we can look at other evidence that make us think that. This idea of inference, they did get. So they were able to kind of wrap their heads around the idea of inferring something as opposed to directly observing something. But then when I kind of got into the weeds and tried to have them kind of parse out definitions of induction versus deduction, we'll save that for the graduate seminar. But I wanted to kind of wrap that up and kind of let people know how that discussion went. It took longer than I thought. I thought I'd be able to do this whole process in one 45-minute period. Fortunately, the Nature Journal Club persuaded me to give myself a little bit more time, and it ended up taking 3 full class sessions. And so it's one to observe it, the next thing, yes, 3 full class sessions, 45 minutes each. And so wanted to, I'm thinking of kind of writing this up and sort of sharing this with other educators as sort of a free download on my site as another nature journaling activity. But also wanted to just sort of turn over to the brain trust here. Any thoughts or ideas that would be useful in kind of pulling into that, and sort of ideas, thoughts, or comments about this activity. So now I am going to remove my spotlight. I'm going to go to the gallery view so I can see anybody who raises their paw. And you can either use the raise hand function or just turn on your camera and wave at me, and we will bring you into the discussion. So thoughts, comments, or ideas about that activity. Let's join Kate. I'm gonna add you into the spotlight. Hey there, Kate, how are you doing? Oh, I have to make you able to unmute. You can now unmute.
Cool. I just was wondering, what do you wish you had done differently?
Yes, that's no, that's a very good question. So when we came back, after they had kind of come up with these sort of the schemes of how these things were organized, I drew it on the board and I said that, all right, let's put this down in your journals. 2 of them did, and the rest of them didn't. And I wish that I had given them more time to diagram these things out and to the 2 sort of possible ways, and then to write out what the predictions were so that it'd be easier to pick up there the next time. There was a little bit of, there's kind of a lag. We had to kind of acquaint themselves. It had been a week and they hadn't been looking at these things. I think that if they had had a chance to kind of diagram the flow of those things in their journals, that would have been easier. My other thing that I'm wondering about is, what if one of the groups did not come up with an alternate plan? And for this to work, you want to have some alternate hypotheses that would lead to different predictions. And so I don't think I was prepared for that. Fortunately for me, it happened. But I think what I'd want to do, should that arise, is to then say, great, now can we come up with a different way of organizing it and challenge all the groups to kind of come up with a different plan? If everybody's all on the same hypothesis, is there another plausible way that these things could have sorted out? Can we come up with that? Let's see, other things. I would like the investigation part where you get to climb the tree be something that the kids actually get to do. I would like it to have something where people, where they've got the question, they know what they're looking for. We walk out and the conversation would be so different if we were all there under the tree looking up into the branches and looking down on the ground and seeing the chainsaws on the ground, seeing the armadillos up on the tips of the branches. But wasn't able to do that. This school ground is kind of a concrete asphalt wasteland.
So that brings up, oh, sorry, still going?
Yes.
I love this. This is great. I just had two thoughts on what you said. Is one, a point of clarification. So you drew on the board as they were explaining their hypothesis, the diagram, and then you were asking them to put it in their journal. Do you think that these kids would have been capable, maybe with some support, of like doing it themselves, like having maybe a volunteer come up and like diagram it on the board? That might have made it like more participatory and more like that they all are trying to do that themselves, or maybe they all try to do it themselves and just try to diagram. Or do you think that it was really helpful? I mean, I depending on the group, I can see where it would be helpful to have the leader doing it and then copying it into their journals, or you know.
Yeah, they had laid them all out on the ground. And yeah, I think that would be a good thing. Now let's take this physical thing and turn it into the abstraction of it on the board, rather than have me explain that. That would be kind of an interesting cognitive step for them to do.
And then my other question is if maybe this group could help us come up with like other common phenomena that we could find.
To do
Because
this
I was
with.
thinking when you're talking about wanting that hands-on experience, I was like thinking of, you know, like because I'm going to be doing a summer class and it's going to be in the classroom and again on a school ground that there's, you know, it's literally AstroTurf. They put that in.
Yes.
So, you know, there's not, you know, anything. And so
and more schools are putting AstroTurf in. And here in the Bay Area, there was the school board passed this move to rip out lawns on schools and put in plastic lawns. Spooky. So yeah, that's a great idea. So in this case, I had these things. What if those aren't in your environment? What if, like, what other kinds of phenomena could we do this with? So let's turn to the team on that question right now. Are there any other phenomena? Shush now, little telephone. Sorry about that, everybody. Now you just no. Stop it! Stop it! Stop it! Stop it! How does this work? So many buttons. Stay. All right. Sorry about that.
Wait, that's just really funny because as a side point, I've been teaching my kids. We did the whole like phenomena challenge where I did phenomena and then they sang do 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 do
do do phenomena.
And it was great. And so now every time I say phenomena in class, one of them will pop up and start going boo 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 boo. So
that is so good.
It's really funny that your phone started making a song like right after you were saying phenomena.
Phenomena. Ding ring ringy. That's good. I love that you're doing phenomena with phenomena.
It's fun.
And so if people are not familiar with phenomena, your life is about to get a whole lot better, because you get to look up on YouTube a little moment in the Muppet Show when the song Phenomena. How do we spell that? Maybe somebody could put a link to the Phenomena, the original Muppet Show version. You do need to see that. But I love that you're doing that with phenomena. Oh, thank you, Kate. With phenomena. All right. I'll never think of it the same way. So, what other phenomena can we? Could this activity work with? Would it work to have so things that kind of go in a sequence? Things that go in a sequence would be good. So that could be like, buds, flowers, could be dandelions in different stages. But anything that is, things that are growing. I wonder if I wonder if you could do that with some erosional features. I'm thinking, looking at shapes of different mesas and buttes and how those change. What do you have there, Kate? And do you prefer Kate or Katie? Oh, you have to unmute. Actually, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to take the big risk here. I am going to allow everybody to unmute themselves when they want to. So we may have a Zoom bomber come in and join us, in which case we'll just try to smack that down as quickly as we can. But everybody can now unmute at will. We give you that power. So what do you think?
Wait, so I go by Kate and Katie, but whenever we have Kate Rudder on, I also go by Katie. So my family's called me that when I
Got
was a
it.
kid. So
Got it.
I go by both. So one thing that I found is inspired by this lesson, but it's a little challenging because it's so tiny, but I collected a whole bunch of, I don't know how to show, there we go. They're the marine snail shells.
Yes.
And then I'm going to return them because the hermit crabs will use them for homes. So I'm going to return them to
I
where
love that you're also
I
taking
know where
care
I
of the
got them
hermit
from.
crabs.
Yeah, so it's a home for the hermit crabs. But before they're homes for the sea snails. And so I collected a whole bunch from like a 10-foot area. And it was funny because I go there all the time and you don't till you look really closely at a piece of sand. And it isn't a place, unfortunately, where I could take the kids because it's an offshore island. So you have to like kayak out there. So maybe I can get a group to go do that with me. And we can do the lesson out there. But I was hoping to bring these into the classroom. So it's like there's a whole bunch of different shells and it's so small that it's a little challenging to show. But there's different colors and there's different stages of weathering that happens on them. Wow, this is like impossible to show. Here we go. And yeah, so here's some, and then there's actually 2 different species that are out there as well. So what I was hoping to try to do with my girls is so you have kind of these different shells of different sizes and then different colors. So of this species we have and so trying to figure out how to group them and then figure out kind of what's happened with them. So this is one that's kind of more whole, and then this is one that's more broken, and just to see if they would even realize like, oh, these are different, these are different species, and some of them are yeah, so like this one I can it's hard to show on the video, but I can feel it. It's like very rough and bumpy. So my guess is that it's more weathered. But there's 2 different species, but I don't know if it's like, I realized as I brought it home, it's a lot because there's 2 different colors of the spiral shells. So there's like the gray ones and the brown ones. And so again, but it's another one of those situations where the kids aren't going to be going out and doing it. And then when you're but I would be able to bring video back. And I think video is still pretty powerful, especially if it's from somewhere they could potentially go with family or by themselves. And because you can see both the brown and the black ones like on the rock at the same time.
Yeah.
So it would be interesting for them to just see the shells and then to find out about. Oh, here's a nice big one.
See, that could be really fun. I could see like the hypothesis. There's the hypothesis that you start as one little kind of like more the rounded ones, and as you grow older, you get more pointy, or that maybe you start off pointy, and then as you age, you get more rounded, or that they're 2 different kinds of things, and if that was the case, then there would be, what would we expect to see when we go out and look on the rocks? If there are 2 different kinds of things, you'd expect to see small versions, medium size, and large versions of all of them. And but if you only find small of one and you big of the other, and then there's some intermediates between those, then that suggests kind of the growth one. So what you would see when you are actually looking at rocks would be, or actually you could probably get those size ones, those size differences, even in the collection there.
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool. That's cool. Something that is and that's a great way. That's a great way to start, and how to, um, what makes us think that there's two different kinds here. How strong is the evidence for that? Um, what are some other phenomena that we could what are some other phenomena that we could do this activity with? So, if you're thinking of dandelions, so the thing that I really like about dandelions is that there is dandelions are fun because there's several different stages that you can clearly identify. And the way that people think it's going to go ends up not quite being what happens. So if you look at um, at say you've got buds, and then they open up into the flower, and everybody's used to that, and then they collapse into a fruit. So everybody's used to that progression, right? But what's fun about the dandelions, so if you've got dandelions on your site, don't let the gardeners get rid of them all, because, oh, you've got dandelions. See, what the dandelions do is, instead of just this linear progression, oh, okay, no spoilers. Go look at dandelions. There's this thing that happens in the middle of the dandelion business. Oh yeah, Kate says they grant wishes. This is also true. I love that. But yeah, go look at dandelions, because there's this stage in the development of how you get to the puff from that little flower. There's this thing that happens in the middle that the kids aren't going to expect. And if you're just sort of thinking, bud, flower, fruit, you're in for a treat, because there's this other thing that goes on. What are some other phenomena that we can use? Let's join Philip. Hey, thank you for being with us. You can unmute.
Yes, good morning, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Laws, for hosting this. This is my first time.
We're delighted to have you with us. Yeah, the conversations that happen in this group, I think, are some of the most interesting discussions that we're having among educators that I've found, and it's like this is like the brain trust of the nature journaling communities coming to these things. So we're really happy to have you here with us.
Well, I'm happy to be here. I'm embarrassed to say it's more than a year ago that I saw the link on your website, and I put it in my calendar, and it happens to be 4:46 a.m. in Zhangzhou, Henan, China, where I am right now. So
that is commitment.
I'm in a different, well, I woke up early. I went to bed early. I woke up early. I looked at my computer, and my trusty computer said, "Hey, you've got a Zoom meeting."
Why not? Good morning to you.
Okay, so you've used the word, which I think, and my hearing might be wrong, but you've used the word phenomena. Is that right?
Yes. So what that
I Googled it, and it's a indie rock band in Portland, Oregon, but
oh, it just got even better. Oh, that's so cool. No, what we're doing is we're making a joke off of phenomena.
Okay.
And there is a very funny song. Let's put the link to that in there again. You have to when you have a chance, check out this short YouTube clip that we're about to put into the chat. The song is Phenomena, and it's such a catchy song that when we're saying phenomena, we're just saying phenomena because phenomena is fun to say.
Right. Okay.
It's from the Muppet Show.
Yeah. Yes, I know exactly the song.
Yeah.
Ma.
There you go. But it
Yeah,
is
I'm
it's
old
actually
enough
it's worth watching again just because.
Oh, I totally will do that.
Okay, good.
So I'm actually a biologist originally by training, and science teacher, visual artist, but my visual art is conceptual and abstract. So this is one of my digital works.
Oh, can you show that to us again?
Sure, the lighting's not real good in my apartment, but
Oh, that is really fun.
yeah, you can see a rainbow in there and everything, but yeah. So that's the kind of work I do. But when you said phenomena, I thought, well, maybe I just didn't hear phenomena right. I'm also a gardener, and one of the coolest, why do they do that? Unexpected things in the food we eat is peanuts.
Oh, tell us about what's the
You
backstory.
know, the peanut is under the ground. What we eat is a peanut. When you get the peanut in shell, you
Yep.
crack it open, you take the kernels out, and that shell is under the ground. But the peanut's part of the bean family. And so it grows up. It looks just vaguely like a clover because it's a multi. Oh, I can't think of the word. Yeah, the leaves have
Little compound.
several compound. Thank
Yeah.
you. It's a compound leaf, and the flowers are beautiful. It's a pea-shaped flower, a legume-shaped flower, yellow flower. So it grows up, it flowers, and then once it's fertilized, a stalk, and I'm sure that's the wrong botanical term, but I'll just say stalk. A stalk grows down into the soil. Yes, it's bizarre. Why do you do that, Peanut? Why don't you just make a bean? It's really bizarre.
That's really cool.
And I had never thought about it. You know, potatoes grow it's actually not the fruit, but the starch storage body which we eat as the potato. Potatoes grow those on the roots under the ground. And through my life, I've from time to time wondered how I basically just assumed somehow the peanut grows the same thing under the ground off the roots.
If you had just asked me at the start of this, how do the peanuts form, I would have said, well, there's probably some part of the root that gets swollen, and but then I would start thinking, yeah, and then I'd have cognitive dissonance for about pollination for a while, and then
that means that after the flower gets fertilized, somehow the developing ovum has to go through the phloem and the xylem back down and come out the root. Yeah. So no, it just grows down from the flower.
That's fun.
Into the soil. It's one of the weirdest things. So that's my contribution to your phenomena. That doesn't make sense. It's going to be so out of any.
That's good. That's good. Yeah. And wouldn't it be interesting to bring in, to sort of start things off, bring in some peanut plants into the classroom, ones where you don't have some kind of clear stalk going down to the peanut, and have kids sort of diagram them, draw them, take them apart, and try to figure out what you think is going on here. What is the story? How did these parts form? And then grow them in the classroom for a while and get to see that little process go on.
Yeah. Peanuts are one of the easiest things to germinate. So
can you eat them? Can you eat them raw, or do you have to roast them?
Yeah, you can eat them raw. It takes maybe I did it 3 years ago. It's probably more than 6 weeks. But they're beautiful. They're absolutely beautiful. The germinating plant is just gorgeous because it's got those compound leaves.
Oh, that's fun.
I did it with my grade 5s and they journaled it. And they took measurements. So it was a maths activity. One of them, they each did their own experiment. Some of them compared different seeds. One of them was like, I want to find out if the peanut's going to grow if I plant the whole shell, not open the shell and just plant the kernel. Never occurred to me, but it was just like, well, why would you do that? Make it easier for the, but so it still came up, and I think the shell stayed underground, if I remember right. But it was just like, that's a cool idea. Why not? So they all did their own experiment, and then they watched them every day. They wanted to come to school so badly because they wanted to see if they had more leaves, or when was the flower coming, or and after it flowers, you can actually, it happens pretty quickly, but you can actually see that somehow the peanut bends that flower stalk down towards the ground and then grows under the soil.
That's fun. That's really, really fun. Avea I saw a comment about that you now have to start growing peanuts. I think I have to start doing the same thing. I think you're going to have a whole bunch of us now growing peanuts.
Well, it's really easy. Just buy the raw peanuts. They're pretty cheap here, and I can get maybe 3 different kinds in my supermarket. Make sure if you do it with kids that they plant 5 of them, because you don't know how old the seeds are or the germination rate. So don't just do one in case that seed's really old and it's no longer going to germinate.
Yeah, that's a good idea. So yeah, this just sort of makes me think that any plant, any kind of plant, you could what a fun way to sort of teach life cycles and things would be to bring in the plant in and have all the stages and say, what do you think? How do you think these are related? How do they connect to each other? What comes after what? Why? And have everybody come up with an expectation on that, and then to grow them together and to see what happens, to actually get the answer by doing that. And that would also, then you could help people, you could figure out some things by deduction and some things by induction. So you could, take a look at the difference in knowing, because I raised this and I sketched it in all these different stages. And there's that kind of knowing. And then there's the deductive, where you could say, well, I think it's this way because I'm seeing this, and or you can use inference to try to figure that out, and then look at the direct evidence versus the inference and how that kind of, where that got us. But that's really cool. That's really cool. So Philip,
yes,
welcome to this group.
Thank you. I do a lot of work with seeds because I love seeds, and I love growing plants.
Excellent. So
It's fun to actually get seeds from a bunch of different kinds of plants. So the brassicas are your cabbages and radishes and bok choy and things like that. And they're all little, tiny little round, well, some of them are not so tiny, but they're little round seeds, like spheres, like little balls. And you have to be really careful because when you put them on the table, they just roll everywhere. So you can actually get the seeds from different plants and just draw the different seeds, because there's, what's the name? Starts with M. It's not mimosa, but it's something like Mizuna. Mizuna, Mizuna, is a Japanese brassica, very lacy leaves. I love the flavor. It's bordering on rocket, or arugula, sort of down that line. Arugula is another brassica. But you can grow those, and they all look almost the same in the first two leaf stage. The first two leaves which come up out of the ground.
cotyledons.
Yeah, but they have a heart shape. And they all have that same shape. So you know right away, oh, I'm a brassica.
Fun.
When they get to the point of having flowers, they all have a 4-petal flower, but different sizes and different shades from white, yellow, pink, and same kind of branching form of the inflorescence. But the plants have different shapes, different shaped leaves, and just comparing those is fun. But if you do something like, a group of brassicas, but then you do peppers or tomatoes or lettuce or so on, you can show just by looking at the leaves how they're really quite different. Eggplant, tomato, pepper. There's one more in the Solanaceae. Potato. I've never grown potato from seed, but eggplant, tomato, pepper, they all have these long, narrow leaves when they germinate. And they take longer to germinate. Tomatoes might take, depending on soil temperature, 2 to 3 weeks to germinate. The brassicas come up in 2 to 4 days. They're so
that's
fast.
fun.
They're wonderful in the classroom. If your soil temperature is warm enough, they're like rockets. Yeah. Even though arugula is a rocket, right?
That's fun. That's great. This really makes us.
You can germinate carrots. Carrots have this tiny, skinny little leaf. But if you have an eggplant or a pepper or a tomato in their germination, they all have these long pointed leaves, 2 long pointed leaves. So you can have the 2 long pointed leaves, and you can compare that to the sort of heart-shaped leaf of the brassicas. I can't think of any more.
Yeah. This just makes you think about the.
One more thing, and I'll shut up. It's your.
No. We want to scavenge all these ideas from your brain.
Okay, so Japanese vegetable box. If you Google Japanese vegetable box, I haven't Googled it for a year, but there's a man or a family, husband and wife, who have a business outside London called Japanese Vegetable Box. And it's one of these where you become a member and they deliver you fresh produce, I think, every week. But he has, on his website, he used to list all the different things he grows, and he would show the different stages of the growth. So when they were germinating, when they were a bit bigger, when they start flowering. And it's really cool, really cool website to do research on what you can expect on how the seeds are going to germinate. They're all in one place. Of course, you can find out a lot of that information quite easily on Google, but Japanese Vegetable Box has it all in one place. One other thing, and I'm just so excited to meet people who want to talk about this kind of stuff. One other phenomena which is really cool is the fact that we see a certain bandwidth of light as human beings. Insects and birds see different bandwidths. So because of that, flowers actually have a very different reflectance spectrum under different wavelengths. So if you look at daisies, what we just see as one yellow daisy will be something that has a big white circle around it, and it has blue, very blue, blue-purple florets in the middle of the daisy, because that's what the pollinator sees that the daisy wants to attract.
Yeah. Oh,
and
that's fun.
Nectar guides inside flowers, the lines which the flowers have, which again, we don't see very well because we don't see that spectrum, that UV spectrum. So
yeah, I know that there are tools that allow us to see into the infrared.
Ultraviolet the same. Yeah.
I've always wanted a kind of ultraviolet lenses to kind of look around the world in. I thought that would be really fun to do.
Yeah.
I'd like to introduce you to another person in our community here. Kate Rudder is an educator in the Bay Area. I'm going to bring Kate into the conversation here. Kate, what does this make you think about, and what's on your mind?
Yeah, so one of the things that occurred when you were talking about what other phenomena, or if you don't have pine cones at the base of a tree, what can we use? And what I was really inspired with is that you shaped that experience with kind of this crucial foothold concept is what I'm kind of talking about, which is that you introduce, like, let's organize these in some type of sequence and introduce the concept that maybe there was a time relevant element to it. And I think it's so interesting to think about other attributes beyond time and sequencing of development that might create different foothold entries into a learning environment. Things like locations, so what's near other things, or are different plants or different beings located in one area as opposed to another area. Some of those are going to have some challenges based on what's available in the outdoor studio that we're working with, but I think conditions might be an interesting foothold concept. Uses or participations, so seeing who visits, seeing kind of what else is around there, and just even the weathering that Katie showed on the potential weathering. We don't know, but the difference in textures and observational form of those shells, the different sizes, potential breakage. I think these, if we introduce these concept of a learning experience, I think it's really helpful not to just have it could be anything, but to kind of have it within this foundation of a foothold concept that would correlate to whatever standards or purpose for the learning that you're using. And I think that was just, that kind of struck me in a different way. And I had a question for you, Jack, about one of the things about how you work with your language or with just the questions that you present in a learning environment, so that it doesn't feel like the teacher knows everything and the kids are figuring it out for confirmation of accuracy. Now, you probably know a lot more about science than fourth graders or than me or than other people, but there's this sense of like being tricked that can happen when you introduce a question and then it turns out that there actually is an answer and that the teacher has kind of goaded us to find it.
Yeah.
And although that's part of learning, I think, in a real way, it can feel very bait and switch. And that just changes a learning experience, I think, into one where it's like, well, if you already knew the answer, why the hell did I do this anyway? And even kids feel that, and adults feel it. I'm curious about how you really co-discover with them when you already understand a lot about the phenomena that you're introducing.
I think that's a huge question. One of the things that I hate is when a teacher plays guess what's in my head, right? Where they've got an answer, like, anyone, Bueller, anyone, and they're kind of fishing for the right answer till if somebody says photosynthesis, and this is yes, photosynthesis. Okay, and if you're doing an open-ended investigation, and you know what the answer is, it is inauthentic. And that's one of the things that I don't like. Hold on, I'm going to grab a book off my shelf.
It's funny because one of the best pieces of advice when I was started to teach at college was never ask a question you actually know the answer to. And it shaped everything for me.
Yeah. So this is a book that a lot of naturalists kind of use as a guide to kind of how to do inquiry with kids. And I actually disagree with a major premise in this. Typically what the coyote mentors doing is they have an answer. And like, what kind of scat is this? And then they're going to they'll use Socratic methods to get the kid to say, it's a coyote scat, and then it's yes, that's right, it's a coyote scat. And then see how, but the teacher has known all along it's a coyote scat, and then the kid eventually arrives at that. But there's this real power imbalance because of the difference. It's different to kind of, as you're saying, find a question that you're authentically interested in, and then try to figure out what is the next question in the chain of curiosity, as opposed to, I'm going to see if I can get you to answer the question that I already know the answer to. In this case, with these cones, the question was never answered. And what I did is I was trying to set it up so that I don't want you to you don't have to come up with the right answer of how these cones are organized, but what is a possible, plausible way they could have been organized. So that's correct. So the student who comes up with, I would organize them this way. Yes, that's correct. That I see you've got a rule that you're applying to organizing those things. That makes a sequence. That is correct. And then this other person came up with a sequence. And that's correct too. That's also a plausible sequence. You've got a rule that you're applying, and it forks. It's a different kind of a structure of thing, and that's interesting also. And then what we did is we're looking for, if this one is true, what would we expect to see? And if this other one is true, what would we expect to see? And then we went and looked for that information, and that pushes us towards one and away from the other. And then they were left in this kind of interesting place where they're thinking, I think it's more likely that one. But wouldn't it be interesting to come back and look at these in different seasons? And I think that if I had been, I had taken the approach of, and look, this group is right, then that whole wonderful discussion with, oh, by the way, that girl who was kind of ostracized a little bit is now thick as thieves with the in crowd. And I wonder if because I gave that sort of thinking strategy that she was using. I sort of said, like, we want to kind of model this, like this behavior they're seeing here. This is a good thing that scientists do when we kind of keeping this open mind about things. But that whole discussion of like wanting to come back and look at it at other seasons and thinking the evidence is leaning me towards this one. In this case, the students weren't left with the right answer. So they're actually at no point did I. So they said, "So are you going to tell us what it is?" And I said that doesn't. That's not part of our process here, right? And there, I think we're able to kind of demonstrate mystery and ways of investigating things, where in this case, there is a correct answer of what is going on, but we're leaving things because we're doing stuff with inference here. We left it in the inference space of the evidence leans towards this one and away from this one. And isn't that interesting? As opposed to this then is the right answer. That partially answers your question. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
I think that's lovely, and the just the distinction of the words of plausible instead of that's right, because in any body of science, I'm gonna, don't kick me out of the Zoom, but in any body of science, all of our answers are as far as we know, right? And
Right.
so as soon as we say yes, that's right, then it shuts that door to consider things that we don't know. And I kind of have to balance that because I don't want every single thing to be open in the world. I can't deal with that level of ambiguity. I like some things to be predictable just so that I can spend my time on things that are not. But there's a really lovely sense of being able to close a learning experience without having to close the questions it represents. And I think you spoke really well to that. So thank you.
Yeah. No, and actually, what you just brought up is this kind of critical idea that I think that people who are new to science get confused about, and that's this whole idea of the uncertainty that comes from trying to understand a world while living in the middle of it.
Hmm.
And we can use our tools of direct observation and inference to try to understand this system. But you can't fully understand the rules of the system if you're embedded in it. And so I am just sort of this, I think will be, I have just put into the chat a journal article that I think would be fun for when I get back. The journal, the book club to investigate, because it is this incredibly interesting paper that makes you think about how is it that we know what we know. And this is not postmodernism where people are saying like you can't really know anything and everything is just opinions and no, because there's a methodology behind science that gets you slowly closer to being less wrong. And that's interesting. So I see that there's a couple of hands in the air. I want to bring Rosa in on the conversation. I want to bring Avea in on the conversation, and I want to bring Philip back in.
And I'm going to shut up, but maybe instead of less wrong, more connected, or in greater relationship. There are things that are harmful with information that doesn't serve the purpose. But, I just really look at a lot of historical things that were right and wrong. And I kind of look back and go like, huh. And so I'm curious about how to not rely on that language.
So here I'm actually, it'd be interesting for us to discuss this because I'm actually using the term less wrong deliberately as opposed to right. And so so I'm not saying right and wrong. I think that there is something that is going on in this universe, right? There are concrete phenomena happening and following sort of patterns and rules. That, and we're getting, if we get closer to understanding those, we're slowly getting less wrong. We never really arrive at the point of being right, because sort of truth is for philosophers. Being less wrong, or having, the other way I think is useful to kind of frame it, is an explanation that is useful. So a very well tested hypothesis is useful because from that hypothesis you can make lots of predictions, and those predictions end up being useful to us. It doesn't mean that it's right, though. Like our understanding of gravitation is useful enough, again, to send up the rocket, have it descend through the Martian atmosphere at known velocities, land safely, and launch a helicopter, right? Which is a demonstration of our understanding of gravitation, but also a massive test of it. Because if that didn't work, that means that there's something in our calculations that we're off, right? But it doesn't mean that we're, but I'd love to kind of pick at that more. But in this case, I am using less wrong in a deliberate way that is different than right. Okay. I'm going to bring in Rosa, Avea, and Philip. Add you into the spotlight.
Hi. Another awesome discussion. So I put in a couple of things in the chat about bringing this topic cross-disciplinary, cross topic subjects in school, for instance, when we were talking about peanuts and getting very excited about all of us wanting to like grow some peanuts and check this out.
Philip has planted some dangerous seeds here, hasn't he?
Farmers.
I was just saying that Philip has planted some dangerous seeds in all of us in this Johnny Peanut seed here. Yeah. So, but please continue.
So, Philip, we would love you to keep coming, but I like 4:46 in the morning is a theoretical time to me. So, you know, but thank you for being here today, because we're going to remember your contributions in perpetuity, as some of us will probably grow peanuts and come back in our thoughts to this conversation. So my Southern heart thrilled to, yes, we'll all be peanut farmers. And Jimmy Carter and George Washington Carver. So there's the part where you can just, in maybe science class, point to that, but then you've left handholds for the history teacher to come in and talk about I don't know, the failures of Reconstruction, post Civil War, depending on how deep you want to get into it. But on a more surface level, you can be like, oh yeah, the president of the United States in the 1970s was a peanut farmer. What did that mean? How much land was he peanut farming on? Why were peanuts an important crop in the South? Stuff like that. If you get into George Washington Carver's endless lists of things you could do with peanuts, why don't we have peanut-based plastic? There's historical reasons, some of them pretty unseemly, for why his brilliance didn't make him a squillionaire and literally free the South. So then the conversation kept going, right? And we were talking about Mizuna and Rocket and those sorts of greens. Kitazawa Seed Company, which is local to those of us who are in the Bay Area, has been selling seeds for the Japanese produce that folks were missing from back home since 1917. There was an interruption in their company, however, because of internment in the 1940s during World War II. So, you know, you can go from, I'm just going to hold this up rather than screen sharing. This is going to work. Yeah. Okay. So we got
Oh,
this
wow.
super gorgeous, like, I want to grow some of that, right? Easy as hell to grow and, you know, get started in maybe a classroom setting. As Philip was pointing out, they germinate like anything. And those are going to be really fun to see the little purple stalks, you know, coming up. But then you also have a toehold into where did we get these seeds from? What's the history of the company we got the seeds from? And what's the history of immigration to the United States and changes in foodways across the country? Because there have been waves of food introduced as we've had waves of immigration. So yeah, I like to cross cut and make the topic, you know, deeper and richer every time we come back to it. So, you know, I'm not doing anything in a classroom setting, but I'm super excited because a local project called Urban Tilth, which is in Richmond, California, has been teaching young people to garden and grow produce and give it and sell it to folks in Richmond, which is largely a food desert.
Yeah.
And so that brings us to issues of social justice and equity. They're also planting a dye garden. So I want to bring nature journaling to Urban Tilth, and I want to bring Urban Tilth to us.
Mhm.
And I think that's most of what I had stored up to bring in.
Wow, and this is this is really making me think about we need to kind of intentionally connect with um, urban agriculture folks and also school garden curriculums and programs. Just there's so much richness here. As you were talking, I wrote down in my journal seeds with a story, and the story behind something is just makes it so different. Like this like I'm imagining the curriculum that comes from what you're talking about with you know these seeds, and that then ties into internment and what were they planting over at Manzanar, and um, then and just contrasting that in my head with buying some seed starts at Home Depot. You know, the seeds with the story. And what if we make ourselves, you know, Veo, who I'm about to bring in on this conversation, she had this comment about sort of representation matters, and that, you know, some of these seeds that tell a story. So you're saying tying it in with George Washington Carver, seeing this sort of thread of this seed line through through Manzanar and beyond. This just got even richer. Ivea.
So yeah, I'd made a comment about representation matters. I hadn't actually been raising my hand. I'd just been holding up this book because we hold up this book a lot.
Oh, yes.
Because
Mine's in the other room. Otherwise, I'd hold mine up right now. That was our book for the book club, which we just finished reading. It's all about critical thinking and really interesting, humbling read.
But to expand on my comment about how representation matters, I think that this is going to be a much bigger discussion, so I'm not going to try to go too far in. But when we think about the environmental movement, I don't know how others perceive it, but I think a lot of people I know as perceive it as being kind of not very diverse sometimes, in certain ways that really matter. And so a thing that I've been learning about and still have a lot to learn about are why that is. What are some of the barriers? There are a lot of different hypotheses we could gather on. We can try to imagine more of them. When Rosa talked about food deserts, it makes me think of Bayview Hunters Point, a neighborhood here in the city. And I wonder if how many other places can relate. When you go to that place, there's trash almost everywhere. I know because I went recently. There are also floods in the roads from the recent rains that are like, we're talking parking lot sized. And I'm guessing it's not only because it's at the lowest part of the watershed, but also because they have the fewest resources out there, because it used to be a naval shipyard, and now there's a ton of brownfield sites because that's where all of the neighborhoods are concentrated. Three guesses about what the predominant ethnicity is who lives in that neighborhood. And the first two don't count. It's mostly Black.
Mhm.
So, and that has to do with the naval shipyard's history. Long story. But the thing is that lowest income, highest rate of crime, most trashed areas, really, really high rates of asthma, other problems there, nosebleeds happening at random. People don't investigate for a long time. They find out 2 months later that the military shipyard had an underground fire happening, a chemical one, and that was causing the nosebleeds. A ton of things, a ton of neglect. And people wonder why, if this is a common experience in a lot of communities of color, why don't more people of color feel welcome in the outdoors? Because people aren't even taking care of their own neighborhoods, our own neighborhoods. If you feel like your own neighborhood isn't being taken care of, it's hard to even imagine going out someplace like nature, because you feel like your home doesn't have value. It lowers the feeling of you having value. And then that's not even counting the racism. There's a reason why we talk about Blackbirder, and about just all of the different barriers that you can encounter, and about how you don't even feel safe going outside, and about the way that you'll be policed. It goes into a lot. But a thing I think of as well is representation. And that's that if we see ourselves represented in different areas, then we feel more welcome to go to those areas. That's both intellectually, like we're talking different colleges, we're talking different careers and professions, we're talking different spaces in the world. The more you see yourself in those spaces or people like you, then the more you feel it's accessible. And so one of my long-term things that I want to do to help with the Nature Journal community and people in general is to increase representation. And so part of that is that I've got this big old set of bookshelves behind me. This entire section right here is full of African American and African history and representation. So I can go through and look through books in there about Black people going out and having their ventures in the environment. Over here is Native American and First People heritage. There's different Asian heritage. Over there is Latino heritage. And those are the kids' books that my godmother has been collecting for a good 40 years or so, maybe more. I'm beginning to set up a smaller book section over here in my area of books of poetry written by people of color. Like there's one called Black Nature. There's books about traditional ecological knowledge, like Tending the Wild. There's Trace by Laurette E. Savoy. There's the anthology I was talking about last night, Colors of Nature. That's a whole bunch of essays by a whole bunch of different authors of color. I know Kate Rutter has that book too. There's like, the more we quote and know and celebrate these voices, then the more we represent and the more people know that they're welcome here. It's a mission of mine, and I hope a lot of us will share that together and do this work together. I'm not sure if that was what you called on me to say, but
that is, and also something for us to really have very much in the forefront of our minds as this nature journaling community is growing and forming. How, if these are conversations that we have towards the start of the of the growth of this community, that's going to really help us be able to grow in a way that is so much richer, so much richer, and it's going to allow more folks to engage with it. You know, you're absolutely right. If you look at the at environmental movements in the United States, in some cases you're seeing things that where kind of the initial intent of things is, you know, let's make a kind of a reserved special place for a few people, and like, you know, where the vision of some places is with just you know, without the native, a place without the Native Americans, where you can kind of go look at the trees. And but then the environmental movement also includes organizations like the United Farm Workers and the work that they're doing to engage with pesticides in the Central Valley. And right now, I'm thinking about that because my daughter is reading this biography of Cesar Chavez, and so we're thinking about a lot of these things. The if we think of nature just as what is over in the park, then it really does become this isolating thing. But if you think of it as sort of larger, about like the air we're breathing in our communities wherever we are, then we realize that this idea of environmentalism is something that doesn't drive us apart, but brings us together. And how can we help enable that? Thank you so much. So Philip, we're going to bounce back to you, and then shortly we're going to be wrapping up this discussion today. But I know that you had your hand up earlier and wanted to bring it back to you. So Philip, what's on your mind?
I actually can't remember what was on my mind back then, because my mind has been filled with much deeper, bigger, broader questions. I actually do know what was on my mind. It just came back to me. And that is going back to the coyote scat. Many times, and apologies, I can't remember which person put the note in the chat. Many times a child or a student does want an answer. And saying, yes, that is a coyote scat, doesn't necessarily stop investigation or inquiry. Because science is like an onion. It's just one layer, and then another layer, and then another layer, and then another layer. And even when you come to the middle of the onion, you can go deeper. You can look at cells. You can look at what's inside the cell, and so on and so on and so on. So with the coyote scat, hey, yeah, this is a coyote scat. Let's take a look at it. What can we find out? What are all these things in this coyote scat? Let's tease it apart. If you find owl scats, you can tease them apart and find these tiny little jawbones of rodents and so on. So you can actually take that scat apart and why are they eating that? How do they catch it? When do they catch it? What parts of the animal get digested? What don't? So the WH questions: what, where, when, where, what, when, where, why, how. Use those to just keep on asking questions. And I always say to my kids at the start of every class, there is no bad question. Mm-hmm. There's only one bad thing. And this is really important in China. There's only one bad thing. And that is, I don't want to ask the question because I might look stupid. Actually, by not asking the question, I can't find out what you want to know. We can't go on a learning journey together. So in my first school, I actually had best question of the week. across the whole school, the primary school, and the kids loved it. And I would say to the principal, you know, I had a whole class who asked questions this week, which were brilliant. Could we award them all with a certificate? And so it became this, I established a culture where they got rewarded for asking really cool questions.
Rosa's just dropped into the chat that we have named this year the year of the question. And a lot of the things which we're doing is to try to, what can we do to stimulate inquiry? Philip, are you intentionally sharing that?
Yep.
Okay.
So I just wanted to pop up. This is my last painting, and very conceptual or abstract. I should say you can ask questions about what it is, but because a painting is what the person sees it as well as the artist. For me, this is about flowers and nectar guides and the colors that bees and butterflies look for when they're looking for a flower to pollinate. So it comes back to that whole phenomena question which we had earlier on. So anyway, I wanted to pop it in the chat, but it didn't seem like there's any way to put something in the chat.
Also, this way, people who are watching the recording later can also see the work. Thank you so much for sharing that. You know, I agree with you about this, that there is nothing wrong with giving information. But what you want to do is when you are giving information, saying that exactly as you modeled, yes, this is a coyote scat. And then we use that information to explore the deeper question and a more interesting question, or a mystery, the question behind the question. And so what I like to do that is different than, say, this approach is I would take the approach of this is coyote scat, and these are the clues that I'm using to tell that. Now, knowing that, what is you know, why is it here, and what can we tell about the frequency of coyotes on this trail? What can we what are the similarities that we find in where we encounter coyote scat along the trail? With, you know, are these always at places where they're also where there are game trail crossings, or what is it? But you, rather than have it be an just sort of Kate Rutter was saying earlier, the idea of not asking the question that you know the answer for, but finding something that you are intentionally curious about yourself, and using that to push the inquiry and discourse further, so that you are with them in an authentic investigation of a mystery, rather than playing guess what's in my brain. You know, and sort of pulling people by the nose through to the point where they say, ah, it's a coyote scat. So in this, we never got to the thing I thought we were going to be talking about, which is about all the different ideas. We do have some interesting ideas on the table here. One is about representation and bringing that into as a subject for future workshops. Similarly, I think we should talk more about the gardening, urban gardening, and using that as a tool in our nature journaling. Questioning and investigation is, of course, something that we want to geek out deeply and more on. But we're interested in your suggestions of of topics. If you have any suggestions, please email them to me. I'm John Muir Laws at johnmuirlaws.com. No. Yes, that's right. If I don't get back to you soon, it's because I am in somewhere in Tanzania without a computer in front of me. But within a few weeks, we'll be back and have more. Then Avea and Billy Joe and I will be sitting down with these and kind of coming up with a smorgasbord of fun topics for. This is you've got a requested documents. Google Doc. That's so much better, Avea. So yeah, don't send them to me. Drop your suggestions into this Google Doc, and then we'll have access to it. We're going to have a bunch more cool conversations. So Philip, these conversations happen every week. They're always really, really interesting, and we, if you're able to be awake for any of them, should you find yourself being a night owl, we would be honored and delighted if you would join us from the other side of the planet. So
it's been a real pleasure. Thank you for welcoming me. I'm an enthusiast. I don't get to talk to many people. I apologize if I talked too much and
not
too
at all.
long today.
Not at all.
But it's so lovely to be able to talk about these things.
And you can if you go on johnmuirlaws.com, we have an archive of past workshops and discussions, and we've got a bunch of the educator forums recorded. If you go into the I've got sort of an archive of past workshops and things, and you can scroll down until there's an educator area, and so you can see a bunch of those past topics. But there'll be more to come there. Avea, any last thoughts or comments or ideas? What is on your mind?
So I know that we were also. Would you mind if I share screens that I can show a couple things that I put into the chat?
Please do.
Excellent. I apologize if I'm a bit messy about this because there's just a lot going on at once. Can you all see this okay?
Yes, we can.
So I just started this, or maybe I didn't just start this. Either way, this is now officially open for people to edit. Nature Journal Educators Forum future topics. People can add any that they would like to this. So myself, Jack, and Billy Joe will be meeting when they return from Tanzania, and we'll start looking at these. There is also, let's see here, I think that this is the one I created. Because Jack had mentioned feedback form, we created this. I believe that it is anonymous. Maybe somebody can test it later. So I wrote down, what would you like to see improve about the educators forum? Because as Jack mentioned, we don't just want we don't want praise. We want actual feedback about how we can do this better. And then also, well, now this doesn't really have to be answered here if you don't want to. Now you can just put it in the document, but still, it's the thought that counts. What topics would you like to see covered in future sessions? And if I do get answers here, I'll make sure that they're added to the doc. A quick thing about, let's see here, YouTube. Just put in, sorry, I apologize, John.
No worries.
There I am. There you are. This is, as you know, Jack's YouTube channel. At present, I'm the one who uploads the videos, that might be changing soon. Here's where you can see the most recently uploaded videos. As you can see, I uploaded 3 of them about 2 hours ago that were from the forum.
Oh, thank you.
You can also find, this is a very useful feature, the playlist over here. So there is also a fresh playlist that will be added to gradually. Year of the Question 2023. There's the Africa series for everybody going to Tanzania and everybody who will pretend that we're going with Tanzania as well. And then there is, sorry, I'm going to try to, there it is, the nature education. And so that was updated today, of course. At the beginning, there's a bunch of different things in here. There's a few of the Nature Journal connection and whatnot. But as you go further down, you begin to see that it is mostly educators forum things here. And then I began putting in NJEF at the beginning of each of them. So you'll be able to see all of the sessions that we've created with the educators forum here.
Wow, we've been doing some cool stuff.
Yeah, we really have, like, really cool things. So I want people to know about this. Accessibility is here too. Hi, Rosa.
Hi, Rosa.
So that is here. Also, if you want the Nature Journal connection with the incredible videos that Jack created, that's here. A lot of us use them as ways of getting honed into each activity. And then last but not least, I think this is the correct document. It is. I emailed this document out to everybody. I don't remember exactly when. It was like maybe within the last couple of days. But these are resources that we've been gathering over the last 3 years, and I've got a lot more Zoom chats to go through. We've got websites made by or featuring educators, so you'll see a lot of familiar names. Put yours here too, if you have them. Websites used by educators, for example, Beatles Project, Walking Curriculum, you get the idea. And you'll see that there are different, I apologize if this is making anybody dizzy, there are different categories. There's webcams, because that was a discussion back in the day. Class web services, we can add more. I noticed that there's a few missing. Online activity books, so the one that Jack and Emily wrote in 2 different forms. Books for educators, we've got some living book lists going on. Let's see here. Articles right
This
over
is
here.
amazing.
Tools and manipulatives used by educators in the classroom. You might notice the WeSee cards that Katie put in there. And nature appropriate gear. We need more of these, and educators forum recording index. So I put the overall playlist, and I might add more to this. So this was begun a couple of nights ago, and it's open for you all to add to it. So I think that's all the resources. Stop now so I don't overwhelm everybody. And I save the Zoom chats.
Holy smoke. Did you guys see that? Avea, that is so helpful, so useful. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you.
Happy to help.
All right, everybody. Again, the educator forums are going to be continuing next week. The week after that, I will not be there with you, but there will be great discussions here. Come on in, join the conversation. Just be kind, be creative, and share the best part of yourself with the group. Avea, thank you again so much for your work, dedication, and I had that started a few nights ago. That is. I'm not encouraging anybody to stay up late because we really do need our sleep, but that is a really, really good night's work there. I'm so glad you did that. Thank you so much.
And also, once again, especially me, I'm gonna miss you and Billy Joe being away. It's gonna be a good 19 days before we see you again. That's a long time. That's almost a month. But we know that you and Billy Joe are doing great things, and we're extremely proud of both of you and all of the good things that you all have done for this community. So we'll miss you and we'll be thinking of you.
Well, thank you so much. I will miss you and really look forward to coming back with some new inspiration and seeing what wonderful things have been happening here while I've been gone. Thank you.
Thank you, Jack.
Bye, everybody. And again, Philip, welcome to the crew.